Imagine this. You say yes again. You swallow the frustration, smile through the discomfort, and tell yourself it's the right thing, the kind thing. But deep inside, resentment builds like a slow fire. You feel invisible. People take without giving back. Opportunities slip away because you never asked. Relationships stay shallow because you never showed your real self. You're exhausted from carrying everyone else's weight while your own needs gather dust. This isn't kindness. This is quiet self-betrayal, and it's ruining your life, one polite yes at a time. If this pain feels familiar, stay with me. This video is for you. Hit that like button if you're ready to stop hiding behind agreeableness, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a Stoic lesson that can change how you live. Number 1. The trap of excessive agreeableness. Excessive agreeableness is not a moral triumph. It is a subtle but devastating surrender of the rational faculty that the Stoics placed at the center of human dignity. Epictetus repeatedly taught that we are disturbed not by things themselves, but by the opinions we form about them. The chronic nice guy forms the opinion that disagreement equals rejection, that silence equals safety, that conflict equals catastrophe. Because he clings to this false judgment, he voluntarily chains his will to the whims of other people. Every time he nods when he wants to shake his head, he hands another piece of his sovereignty to someone who never asked for it and will never value it. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private meditations that the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Yet the agreeable man spends his mental energy constantly scanning for signs of displeasure in others. He rehearses conversations in advance to remove any possible friction. He polishes every sentence until it cannot possibly offend. In doing so, he starves the part of his mind that should be devoted to wisdom, courage, and justice. The inner dialogue that should strengthen character becomes instead an endless negotiation with imaginary critics. Over years, this habit hollows a man out until very little of his original shape remains. Seneca observed that we are tormented most by what we fear losing. For the people pleaser, what he fears losing above all is approval, the good opinion of others. Because approval is placed outside his control, he can never rest. Every new person, every new situation renews the threat. He lives like a debtor who must constantly pay interest on a loan he never wanted to take. The Stoics call this a voluntary slavery. No master ever forced the chains on him. He locked them himself, and he carries the key in his pocket, yet refuses to use it. The worst injury is not that others exploit this weakness, though many will, but that the man himself comes to despise the reflection he sees each morning. He knows, somewhere beneath the layers of rationalization, that he has traded integrity for convenience. He has chosen the path of least resistance over the path of greatest value. Each small betrayal compounds until self-respect erodes to almost nothing. Resentment then turns inward. He does not blame the people who took advantage. He blames himself for being too weak to stop them. This is the quiet tragedy at the heart of chronic agreeableness. Stoicism does not ask you to become harsh or rude. It asks you to become honest, first with yourself. Examine the motive behind every yes. Is it born of rational judgment that this action serves justice and the common good? Or is it born of fear that disagreement will cost you affection? The second motive is not virtuous, it is servile. Virtue requires discrimination. Indiscriminate agreeableness is the opposite of discrimination. It is surrender disguised as generosity. When you see this clearly, the first crack appears in the trap. Freedom begins the moment you decide that your own reasoned judgment deserves at least as much respect as anyone else's opinion. You do not need permission to value your time, your energy, your truth. The Stoic does not seek conflict for its own sake, but he does not flee it when principle demands he stand. Reclaim that ground. Stop apologizing for having a spine. The moment you stop equating kindness with self-erasure, the entire architecture of the trap begins to collapse. Number 2. How people-pleasing betrays your inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius described the mind as an inner citadel, a fortified place that remains impregnable so long as its gates are guarded by reason. The people-pleaser leaves those gates wide open. Every request, Every hint of disapproval, every expectant look walks straight in and takes command. The citadel that should shelter his tranquility becomes instead a public square where strangers vote on his actions. No external army ever breached the walls. He invited the occupation himself. Seneca warned that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The agreeable man lives almost entirely in that imaginary realm. He pictures the disappointed face, the cold silence, the whispered judgment, and these phantoms hurt him more than any real refusal ever could, because he has inflated the cost of saying no to apocalyptic proportions. He pays an enormous price every day just to avoid a discomfort that usually lasts only seconds. This is not prudence. It is cowardice wearing the mask of consideration. When you continually place other people's comfort above your own legitimate needs, you commit an injustice, not against them, but against yourself. Stoic justice is not only fairness toward others, it is fairness toward the rational being that you are. By overgiving, you violate that internal contract. You teach yourself that your own well-being is negotiable, that your limits are optional. Over time, this lesson sinks so deep that you stop feeling entitled to basic respect. The betrayal is complete when you no longer even notice you are betraying yourself. The relationships built on this pattern are almost always unbalanced. One party gives endlessly, the other takes without reflection. Because no boundary ever appears, no reciprocity is ever required. The giver becomes invisible infrastructure, present but unnoticed until he stops functioning. Then resentment erupts, not because the taker is evil, but because the giver finally realizes he has been living as utility rather than as equal. The Stoic seeks friendships of mutual virtue, not relationships of one-sided extraction. Epictetus taught that the only thing that truly belongs to us is our reasoned choice. Everything else, wealth, reputation, even other people's affection, is externality. When you make approval an externality, you must purchase with compliance. You enslave your will to something forever outside your power. True freedom is the ability to say, I will act according to reason and nature, and if the world dislikes it, that is the world's misfortune, not mine. People-pleasing postpones that freedom indefinitely. Reclaim the citadel by practicing vigilant gatekeeping. Before you agree, pause and ask 3 questions. Does reason approve this action? Does it align with my duties to myself and to virtue? Would I advise a friend I respect to do the same? If the answer is no, then the refusal is not rudeness. It is fidelity to the only thing that can never be taken from you, your character. Guard that fortress. No one else will. Number 3, the illusion of respect through niceness. The deepest illusion the agreeable man cherishes is that constant accommodation will eventually earn him lasting respect and love. Stoicism dismantles this belief with surgical clarity. Real respect arises from perceived strength of character, not from perceived usefulness. Marcus Aurelius noted that most people look only at surfaces. They see a man who never disagrees and conclude he has no spine worth fearing or admiring. Harmlessness invites dismissal, not reverence. When you never assert your own value, others have no reason to assign any weight. You become background furniture, comfortable, dependable, easily ignored. Seneca wrote that we should live according to nature, which means according to reason, courage, and justice. Over-agreeableness contradicts every one of those virtues. It replaces courage with avoidance, justice with self-sacrifice, reason with emotional reactivity. The man who lives that way cannot command respect, because he does not even respect the laws of his own nature. Another layer of the illusion is the belief that if you give enough, people will feel obligated to give back. Yet human psychology does not work that way. People value most what is scarce or defended. When your time, attention, and energy are handed out freely and without condition, they lose perceived worth. The moment you set a rational limit, you force others to reassess your value. Some will leave. The ones who stay do so because they now see something worth respecting. Chronic agreeableness breeds quiet contempt even in those who benefit from it. They sense the imbalance. They know the yes was not freely given, but extracted by default. Deep down, they lose respect for the man who cannot say no, just as you eventually lose respect for yourself. True affection and admiration require mutuality. One-sided generosity eventually feels like manipulation, even when no manipulation was intended. The Stoic path is indifference to applause and disapproval alike. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that the opinion of others is nothing more than noise unless it aligns with truth. Stop trying to purchase regard with compliance. Stand in your principles quietly but firmly. The respect that arrives this way is smaller in quantity but infinitely higher in quality. It does not disappear the first time you enforce a boundary. Choose the harder but more enduring road. Let people dislike your no if they must. Their dislike is an externality, temporary, fleeting, ultimately indifferent. What is not indifferent is the integrity you preserve when you stop begging for approval and start living from a center that needs no one's permission. That center commands respect naturally, without ever asking for it. Number 4, reclaiming power by saying no with wisdom. Saying no is not an act of aggression. It is an act of sovereignty. Epictetus drew the famous line between what is up to us and what is not. Our reasoned choices are up to us. Other people's feelings about those choices are not. The agreeable man blurs this line so badly that he treats someone else's disappointment as proof he has done wrong. He surrenders the only domain he truly owns, his will, to the emotional weather of others. Power leaks away in every unnecessary concession. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by flatterers, schemers, and endless demands, still managed to act from principle rather than pressure. He practiced calm, factual assertion. He did not apologize for having priorities. He did not decorate his refusals with excuses. He stated what was true and necessary, and let the consequences fall where they would. That discipline is available to anyone. It requires only the decision to value your own rational judgment above temporary social comfort. Start small. Decline one low-stakes request this week. Feel the spike of anxiety. Watch it rise, and then watch it fall when nothing catastrophic follows. Each survived no strengthens the muscle of self-possession. Over time, the discomfort shrinks because you stop believing the old story that disagreement equals disaster. You prove through experience what Epictetus taught in theory. Other people's reactions are externals. They cannot harm your character unless you let them. When you say no from reason rather than resentment, your refusal carries a different tone. It is not defensive or bitter. It is clear and final. I cannot take that on right now. That does not fit my current commitments. No long explanation, no pleading. The brevity itself communicates strength. People sense you are no longer negotiating your worth. They adjust. Some test the boundary once or twice. When it holds firm, the testing stops. This practice transforms relationships. Superficial connections, the ones that existed only because you were endlessly available, fade naturally. Authentic connections deepen because they are now built on truth instead of convenience. You begin to attract people who value character over compliance, who respect limits instead of exploiting the absence of them. The quality of your circle improves precisely because you stop trying to keep everyone inside it. Seneca called true freedom self-possession under any condition. Saying no wisely is one of the clearest paths to that freedom. You stop being a passenger in your own life. You take the wheel. You decide where energy goes, who receives your time, what principles guide your days. That shift is not rude. It is adult. It is stoic. It is powerful. And it is long overdue. Number 5. Building a life of authentic virtue instead. The remedy for destructive agreeableness is not becoming disagreeable. It is becoming virtuous in the full Stoic sense. Virtue means living in accordance with nature. Rational, courageous, temperate, just. Replace the reflex to please with the discipline to examine. Every day ask, what action right now best honors reason and my duties? Marcus Aurelius used his journal to keep that question alive. You can do the same. A few honest lines each evening expose the places where fear still masquerades as kindness. Cultivate courage, Not the loud, chest-beating kind, but the quiet courage to be seen as you truly are. Express needs without apology. State limits without anger. Accept that some people will withdraw when you stop being endlessly accommodating. Their withdrawal is information, not tragedy. It shows who valued your compliance and who values your character. Over time, you build a life surrounded by the second group that is worth far more than universal likability. Practice justice toward yourself. You are not less deserving of consideration than anyone else in the room. Honor your time, your rest, your goals with the same seriousness you show others. Temperance keeps you from overgiving out of habit or guilt. Wisdom discerns the rare moments when yes is truly virtuous from the common moments when it is merely easier. These four virtues together form a shield that people-pleasing can never provide. As resentment fades, because you no longer allow yourself to be used, inner calm returns. You act from principle instead of pressure. Decisions become lighter because they are no longer filtered through the question, will they like me? They are filtered through, is this right? That single change removes an enormous psychic burden. Life feels less like a performance and more like a deliberate creation. Epictetus said the free man is the one who is master of himself. Mastery is not domination of others. It is refusal to be dominated by approval, fear, or habit. Shedding the nice guy mask is one of the clearest ways to claim that mastery. You stop living as a supporting character in everyone else's story and start living as the protagonist of your own. The plot is no longer dictated by the expectations of the crowd. It is written by reason, guided by virtue. This is the Stoic promise, a life of quiet power, deep peace, and genuine connection. Not because everyone likes you, but because the people who remain do so for the right reasons. Start today. One honest no. One unapologetic need. One decision rooted in principle instead of people-pleasing. Each step moves you closer to the man Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus knew you could become. Calm in chaos, firm in values, kind without compromise. That life is not a fantasy. It is waiting on the other side of a single, courageous choice. Take it. Number 6. The cost to your mental tranquility. Excessive agreeableness quietly destroys the inner peace that Stoics valued above all else. Seneca taught that true tranquility comes from living according to reason, not from avoiding every ripple of displeasure. Yet the people-pleaser spends his days in constant anticipation of others' moods. Will they be upset? Will they withdraw affection? This endless mental scanning turns the mind into a restless guard dog, never at rest. Tranquility requires detachment from externals. Agreeableness glues your peace to the approval of others, making calm impossible. Every suppressed no creates a small debt in your soul. You tell yourself it's minor. That harmony is worth the price. But these debts accumulate. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to focus only on the present task at hand. Yet the agreeable man is forever dragged into imagined futures of conflict or rejection. His mind is occupied not with virtue, but with damage control. Over time, this constant vigilance exhausts the rational faculty until even simple decisions feel heavy. Peace slips away not because life is hard, but because you've made others' opinions the measure of your worth. Epictetus drew a sharp line. Externals like praise or criticism are indifferent. They cannot touch your character unless you grant them power. The nice guy grants that power freely. He interprets a frown as proof of failure, a canceled plan as personal rejection. These interpretations are voluntary judgments, and they poison tranquility. Stoicism urges you to question every disturbing thought. Is this fact or fear? When you stop treating disapproval as disaster, the mind begins to settle. Tranquility returns only when you reclaim ownership of your judgments. The deeper cost is chronic low-grade resentment. You give beyond your limits, then feel used when reciprocity never arrives. Instead of addressing the imbalance, you swallow it to preserve the illusion of kindness. This swallowed anger doesn't vanish, it festers. It shows up as irritability, fatigue, or sudden outbursts. Seneca warned that anger is a brief madness, Suppressed resentment is a slow one. It erodes your calm from within until you no longer recognize the steady man you once were. True Stoic kindness is measured and deliberate. It flows from strength, not depletion. When you give from overflow rather than obligation, your actions enhance tranquility instead of draining it. The agreeable man gives from scarcity, fearing loss if he withholds. This scarcity mindset turns generosity into sacrifice. Shift to abundance. Protect your inner resources first, then share wisely. Tranquility becomes sustainable when your peace no longer depends on universal likability. Reclaim tranquility by daily practice. Each morning, remind yourself, today I will act from reason, not reaction. When a request arrives, pause. Ask, does this align with virtue or merely avoid discomfort? Choose the former. Feel the initial unease of potential disapproval, then watch it pass like a cloud. With repetition, the mind learns that disapproval is harmless noise. Tranquility is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of unshakable inner order. Stop paying for fake peace with your real serenity. Number 7. How agreeableness weakens true kindness. Stoics distinguish genuine kindness from its counterfeit. Marcus Aurelius described kindness as invincible when sincere and without hypocrisy. But excessive agreeableness is rarely sincere. It's often fear in disguise. You say yes not because it's good, but because saying no feels unbearable. This makes your kindness fragile, conditional, and ultimately hollow. True kindness stands firm. Fake kindness crumbles under pressure. The agreeable man performs generosity, but performs it so often it loses meaning. When every boundary is erased in the name of being nice, others stop seeing your actions as gifts. They see them as defaults. Seneca noted that what is given freely and without expectation retains its power. But when you give endlessly without discernment, the act becomes invisible. People expect it, demand it, then resent you the moment you pause. Your kindness, meant to uplift, instead breeds entitlement. The very virtue you chase turns against you because it lacks the backbone of justice and temperance. Epictetus taught that virtue must be chosen deliberately. Indiscriminate agreeableness removes choice. It becomes reflex. You no longer decide to help. You help because stopping would expose the fear beneath. This robs kindness of its moral weight. A kind act has value only when it could reasonably be refused. Without that possibility, it's not virtue, it's habit. Over time, your capacity for real, intentional kindness atrophies because you've trained yourself to equate refusal with cruelty. The agreeable man often confuses being liked with being good. He believes universal approval proves his virtue. Stoicism reverses this. Virtue proves itself through consistency, not popularity. Marcus Aurelius endured criticism without flinching because he measured himself by his own rational standard. When you tie goodness to others' smiles, you dilute it. True kindness persists even when it's inconvenient or unappreciated. It doesn't need applause to exist. Another hidden damage. Agreeableness prevents authentic connection. People sense when your yes is forced. They feel the absence of real choice. Relationships built on one-sided accommodation stay surface level. Genuine kindness invites reciprocity and depth because it includes honest limits. Without them, interactions feel transactional. You become a service provider, not a friend. The warmth you crave eludes you precisely because you've hidden your full humanity behind endless compliance. Restore true kindness by reintroducing choice. Practice selective generosity. Help when reason approves. Refuse when it doesn't. Let your no be as calm and clear as your yes. People will initially adjust. Some will leave. The ones who stay will value your sincerity. Kindness regains its power when it's voluntary, bounded, and rooted in virtue, not fear. This is the Stoic way. Be kind without compromise, generous without self-erasure. Strength and compassion together create the only kindness worth giving. Number 8. Living unapologetically as your true self. The ultimate freedom in Stoicism is living without apology for who you are. Epictetus declared that if you seek outside approval, you compromise your integrity. Be your own witness. The agreeable man lives for witnesses everywhere except within. He apologizes preemptively for having needs, opinions, limits. Each sorry erodes his self-respect until he feels he must justify his existence. Stoicism calls you to stop apologizing for your rational nature. You are allowed to exist fully. Marcus Aurelius practiced indifference to praise and blame alike. He knew both were fleeting externals. The nice guy treats blame as catastrophe and praise as oxygen. This imbalance keeps him small. Unapologetic living means accepting that some will misunderstand you, dislike you, or leave, and letting that be their concern. Your concern is fidelity to virtue. When you stop curating yourself for approval, you step into authentic presence. Life becomes lighter because you're no longer carrying the weight of invented expectations. Seneca urged strictness with yourself and tolerance with others. The agreeable man reverses this. Endless tolerance for others, harsh judgment toward himself. Flip the script. Demand excellence from your choices while allowing others their flaws without resentment. This creates balance. You no longer shrink to fit others' comfort. You expand into your full reasoned self. Unapologetic doesn't mean arrogant. It means honest. Speak your truth calmly. Pursue your duties without explanation. Live as though your life belongs to you. Fear of disapproval keeps many trapped in mediocrity. Opportunities pass because asking feels selfish. Relationships stagnate because vulnerability feels risky. Stoicism teaches that discomfort is temporary. Regret is permanent. Choose short-term unease over long-term diminishment. Each time you act unapologetically, state a boundary, decline politely, express a need, you prove to yourself that the sky doesn't fall. Confidence builds not from constant yes, but from survived no's. The man who lives unapologetically attracts different people. Superficial connections fade when you stop performing agreeableness. Deeper ones emerge with those who respect strength and authenticity. You no longer waste energy maintaining illusions. Time opens for real pursuits, work that matters, relationships of equals, self-mastery. Epictetus reminded us, how long will you wait to demand the best for yourself? Stop waiting. Demand it now by refusing to apologize for having a spine. This is the Stoic culmination, a life aligned with nature, rational, courageous, temperate, just, without constant negotiation. You become calm because your worth is internal, strong because your choices are deliberate, kind because you give from fullness, not fear. Unapologetic living isn't rebellion. It's return to what you always were before fear taught you to shrink. Start small. One unsoftened statement, one honest refusal, one day without sorry. Build from there. The man who stops apologizing for his existence finally begins to live it fully. That is the powerful, liberated life Stoicism promises. Claim it today. You now stand at the edge of real change. The life of the chronic nice guy is not noble. It is a slow surrender disguised as virtue. Every unexamined yes has quietly stolen from your tranquility, your self-respect, your authentic relationships, and your capacity for genuine kindness. Stoicism does not ask you to become cold, rude, or selfish. It asks you to become honest, to stop measuring your worth by the comfort of others, and start measuring it by the integrity of your choices. The resentment you feel is not proof that people are ungrateful. It is proof that you have been ungrateful to yourself. That ends today. The moment you decide that your reasoned judgment deserves the final say, above fear, above approval, above habit, you step out of the shadow of agreeableness and into the light of Stoic life. Calm under pressure, firm in principle, kind without compromise.